Hey now, welcome back to the Deadology podcast. I'm your host, Howard Weiner, and today is August 10th, 2023. 28 years ago today, Bob Dylan had a press release regarding the passing of Jerry Garcia, who passed away the day before on August 9th, 1995. And that's going to be the crux of what we look at today on episode 2 of Deadology. It's one of the best tributes I've ever heard for Jerry. And August 9th, people think of different things. It's, for me, when August 9th comes around, I always look forward to celebrating the music of Jerry Garcia, which I basically do every day. I do 365 days a year. But especially on August 9th, when that rolls around, I break out the paragraph Dylan wrote about Garcia and just kind of look at it in awe. Such an amazing tribute to Jerry. But before we dive into that, I would just like to acknowledge the passing of the great Robbie Robertson. The music world has taken so many awful hits lately. Robbie Robertson, just an amazing songwriter, guitar player, just a person on the huge impact person on the music scene for many years, but especially in the 60s, the early 70s with the band and Bob Dylan. Really sad to see him go. So he passed away August 8th. News of that came out on August 9th on the anniversary of Jerry's passing. But on a much brighter note, yesterday I went up to the Ulster Performing Arts Center and saw one of the greatest jazz concerts I ever seen. It was Jack DeJohnette's 81st birthday, the great jazz master drummer, and it was a tribute to Miles Davis. We had Wallace Roney on trumpet, and Carlos Santana showed up and played for the full 2 hours with the band. It was incredible. He did the Bitches Brew in a Silent Way era, and just a thundering, beautiful jazz concert, man. It was incredible. So the eternal spirit of music carries on. And now I'm going to jump into the Dylan press release. First I'm going to read it, then we'll pick it apart and dig into it, unpack it a little bit. So this is what the press release said word for word. There's no way to measure his greatness or magnitude as a person or as a player. I don't think any eulogizing will do him justice. He was that great. Much more than a superb musician with an uncanny ear and dexterity. He's the very spirit personified of whatever is Muddy River country at its core and screams up into the spheres. He really had no equal. To me, he wasn't only a musician and friend. He was more like a big brother who taught and showed me more than he'll ever know. There's a lot of spaces and advances between the Carter family, Buddy Holly, and, say, Ornette Coleman, a lot of universes, but he filled them all without being a member of any school. His playing was moody, awesome, sophisticated, hypnotic, and subtle. There's no way to convey the loss. It just digs down really deep. That's what Bob Dylan had to say about Jerry Garcia. Beautiful stuff. All right, let's start from the top here. There's no way to measure his greatness or magnitude as a person or as a player. When you're sitting down to do something like this, what do you say about Jerry Garcia? That was what Dylan was confronted with. And there really is no way to describe his greatness. You can't say, well, he had number one albums, the Grateful Dead had the greatest tour, the best live band, he's a great guitarist. There's just no words or no measurement that will capture his greatness or what he meant to people. So, pretty cool. Dylan starts off right away. There's no way to measure his greatness or magnitude. But it's not just as a player, it's as a person. Dylan loved Garcia, obviously, and Jerry had this way of making everybody feel comfortable. Obviously, his audience, the fans that loved him, but even other musicians. Dylan must have felt totally at ease. Jerry, Dylan is a tough guy. For people to get nervous in front of him, and and they don't act like themselves. Dylan would see Jerry, and he could tell the guy was 100% authentic, and he took to him right away. And generally across the board, every musician that runs into Garcia has nothing but complimentary things to say about him as a person, which is amazing. So, a very, very loved person. Even, I went to the Miles Davis tribute last night, reading the Miles Davis biography, and he didn't have a lot of good things to say about people, especially in the Bill Graham era back in the 60s, early 70s, when he took the stage with the Grateful Dead. But when it came to Garcia, I'm reading it, all of a sudden he's saying great things about Jerry Garcia, about how much he liked him. So it traveled, man. Jerry cut across every line, even his contemporaries and peers, they all kind of loved him. So, it's hard to measure his greatness as a person as well. And then the next thing Dylan says, kind of makes me laugh. I don't think any eulogizing will do him justice. I don't think he meant it to be funny, but Dylan proceeds to go on and do a great job eulogizing him, as good as anybody could do. So this one if the funeral service were somebody reading this one paragraph and then just cutting right to Jerry Garcia's music, that would have been the perfect tribute at the funeral to him. So in a way, what Dylan did here was like the perfect eulogy, short and simple, and as to the point as anyone could get. So this is the perfect eulogy, but it's as good a eulogy as I've ever heard for any famous person. And coming from Bob Dylan, that's a pretty amazing feather in Jerry's cap. I'm sure he would have been very proud to hear what Dylan had to say about him here. So continuing on with Dylan's press release, he was that great, much more than a superb musician with an uncanny ear and dexterity. He's the very spirit personified of whatever is Muddy River country at its core and screams up into the spheres. Man, what a great description that is. First, the uncanny ear. As a musician, Garcia was just such a great listener on stage. He could play off of anybody or anything. And the uncanny ear, which Bob Dylan had an uncanny ear too, is just the ability to identify great music, stuff that other people don't hear, and bring it into your own realm. And that led to the very spirit personified of whatever is Muddy River and screams up into the spheres. So Muddy River, I'm thinking Catfish John, Black Muddy River, Little Sadie, and screaming up into the spheres, Dark Star, just the brilliant improvisation of Dark Stars. So it's everything Americana, but also reaching out into the universe. Then the next line in this press release, he really had no equal. How true are those words? When you think of Robert Plant, then you think of Roger Daltrey and maybe Mick Jagger, and all these guys are on the same level. And with Garcia, he was just kind of, or looking at the guitarists, Clapton, Beck, Page. Garcia, there's really nobody by his side. He was one of a kind, man. Really an incredible thing to be that much of a one of a kind. But there's no one you put by Garcia's side. You can't. The way you put Beck, Page, and Clapton together, there's no one there to match with Jerry Garcia. There was one Jerry Garcia. There'll never be anybody like him. Just such an individual musician and musical spirit. And then Dylan goes on. To me, he wasn't only a musician and friend. He was more like a big brother who taught and showed me more than he'll ever know. One thing that catches me right away with that is how Dylan refers to him as being like a big brother. For one thing, Bob Dylan was a year older than Jerry Garcia. So he just didn't say brother, he said big brother. And I think that kind of maybe reflects just the wisdom Garcia had as a person. And as far as Deadheads, we always kind of looked at him as like a father figure, someone who's, he didn't want to be a father figure, but he was like the leader of the family somehow, even though he never sought to do it. But there's definitely like a family bond thing with Jerry Garcia, whether it's somebody like Dylan who looks at him in that manner, or Deadheads who definitely flock to Garcia, and definitely the wisdom and the humor of the guy. Just, when you heard something from Garcia, you knew nuggets of wisdom were coming out when you hear him interviewed, and very funny man. So he always had that big brother or fatherly kind of effect. And coming from Dylan, once again, to say he was more like a big brother, I mean, that's pretty cool. That's that's saying a lot there. And then the following statement, who taught me and showed me more than he'll ever know. So Dylan took notice when Jerry was doing something. They were playing together. Dylan was, as much as Dylan turned everybody from the Dead to everybody in the rock world onto lyrics and changed music, kind of like the way Miles Davis did. Dylan had his eye and ear open to what Jerry was doing, because he was like, this guy has something. He has some kind of wisdom. There's something there I could learn from him. And he really, I mean, it's more than Jerry will ever know. Dylan was definitely learning from what Jerry was doing. And I think in one obvious way that came through was with the whole time Dylan and the Dead played together, 86 and 87. Dylan was kind of lost in his career at that time, commercially, down in the dumps, kind of looking to be re-inspired. He lost inspiration, he kind of lost direction. And what he saw from Garcia and the Grateful Dead was, just go out there and just be a player, man. You got these songs, go out there, make it happen, and everything else will be all right. Just live in the moment. And I mean, Dylan had the song catalog to do that. Just go out there and not worry about making his next great album or that kind of thing. Just dig into, I'm Bob Dylan. I wrote all these great songs. Let me go back, cherish what I wrote, bring it back to the people, tour, just live in the moment. And then when the inspiration strikes me, I'll write the next great album. And he really kind of followed in the path of the Grateful Dead after he played with them with his never-ending tour. So in many ways, there's a lot of things Dylan learned from Garcia and the Grateful Dead, and a nice little tribute there. And I think that's a tribute to what Dylan's talking about here when he says, taught and showed me more than he'll ever know. And going on with Dylan's press release, the next line's great. I love the musicians he references here. He says, there's a lot of spaces and advances between the Carter family, Buddy Holly, and, say, Ornette Coleman. A lot of universes, but he filled them all without being a member of any school. So you got the Carter family, the foundation of folk music and bluegrass, Harry Smith's American Anthology of Folk Music. Just that whole folk foundation is a part of who Jerry Garcia was. Buddy Holly, the whole rock and roll side, rhythm and blues, and then the last one, Ornette Coleman, avant-garde jazz, just going way out there. So Jerry really had it all. Once again, screaming into the spheres. For everything, the Peggio, Jacaro, the folk foundation, rock and roll, Sugar Magnolia, and then once again that Dark Star, other one, drum space, Ornette Coleman thing. It was all there, and it came out in the Grateful Dead, and it came out in Jerry Garcia Band. And he did it all without being a member of any school. So when you think of Clapton, blues guitarist, think of Wes Montgomery, jazz guitarists. Garcia, very much, he checks all the boxes. He was a blues guitarist, he was a jazz guitarist, he was a great rock and roll guitarist, but he was never a member of any school. You never hear anyone say the great blues guitarist Jerry Garcia. So he was a great blues guitarist, but he was never identified or labeled as any. He did it all. Did all those, and he could do it within one song. He could go from blues to jazz without being a member of any school. And really, that's one of the things that set him apart. And it almost came easily to him when he would approach music. It all just came out. And then the next thing Dylan says, I've used all these adjectives in describing his playing, but Bob just picked the right ones and put them all together. His playing was moody, awesome, sophisticated, hypnotic, and subtle. So whenever I read that, one performance comes to mind that kind of fits those descriptions. It was a Jerry Garcia show from February 6, 1972 in Pacific High Studio. It was Garcia, Merle Saunders, Billy Kreutzmann on drums, and John Kahn on bass. On that day, they played one of the greatest shows ever, and it was my first bootleg Jerry tape. So for my first Jerry bootleg tape, I struck gold. I had about 10 dead tapes at the time, and I played this thing. And it's the first song is "It Takes a Train a lot to laugh. It takes a train to cry." Dylan's great song, and it kicks in. The band's digging on the chord progression, and it just moves along, hypnotic, just subtle. And Garcia keeps going and going. There's no singing. All of a sudden, I'm seeing the calming waves of the Pacific Ocean. I'm feeling great. I'm like, this is crazy. That was hypnotic, awesome music. So the jam. It's not really even a jam. It's just they're celebrating the beginning of "It Takes a Lot to Laugh, It Takes a Train to Cry," and each chord progression it draws you in a little more. Garcia plays a little bit of a different lick, but it's almost this repetitive. Listen to how great this is. I'm gonna grab the audience's attention, and we're gonna focus on this brilliant blues riff here. And when Dylan was recording "It Takes a Lot to Laugh," they did mostly fast versions. But when they found this, they struck gold. And this is just Garcia reaffirming it. It's just his love for the music. He just got lost in it, and he brings the audience with him. And just incredible stuff, man. It's hypnotic, subtle, and awesome. And Garcia did it on, obviously with the Grateful Dead. They did it on so many situations, like they'd go from Scarlet to Fire, and it's almost like Garcia wouldn't want to leave Scarlet, but some of the band would start going into Fire, and he'd start going into Fire. So it was like tough for them to leave a song because they loved it so much. But they were excited about going to the next song, and they would always do these great transition jams. It was like not fade away, going down the road, not fade away. It happened there too, where just this hypnotic playing where you're in two songs at once. And Garcia was the master of that for sure. And then also taking a song like "Dear Prudence," John Lennon's great song, second song on the White Album. It's a little 3-minute number, but it's brilliant. And 3 minutes is not enough for Jerry. So he does a live version of "Dear Prudence," and it became one of the great Jerry Garcia band songs. And it's not saying I need to do this better or anything. It's a celebration of the 3 minutes that Lennon put out there. And 3 minutes is not enough for Jerry, man. He wants to dig in round and round, and he wants to cherish every chorus, and then celebrate it with a good long peaking guitar jam in the middle, and just 12 to 15 minutes of celebration of "Dear Prudence," and it still stays within the essence of what Lennon was getting across. So he's not taking something, he's doing something totally different, but it still has the essence of the original person who wrote it. Same thing with the Dylan songs he covers. Definitely, it's a lot different than the way Dylan did it, but still the essence comes across. Now, contrary to this is the way most people work, and there's nothing wrong with that. Bob Weir covered many great Dylan songs in the mid to late 80s. You had your Queen Jane Approximately, Desolation Row, Ballad of a Thin Man, Stuck Inside a Mobile. And these versions were great, and they were such a great addition to the Dead's repertoire those years. But Bob Weir pretty much played it like Dylan played it, as staying with that template, and it was fantastic. It was great. But there's only one. Jerry Garcia had no equal. There was like when he did a cover, he would just find something to fixate on that the original artist never, or the original artist may have thought of, but he just drew more out of it. He always would he would take a song he loved and draw more out of it. I'll take a simple C to G and feel brand new about it, as Garcia sings in I'll Take a Melody, the Alan Chansons song, and it's so much different than the original. When you hear I'll Take a Melody, you if you didn't know better, you could believe that it was a Garcia Hunter song. Garcia just has a way of pushing these songs across as originals, and it's really an amazing thing, and that's what Dylan's getting at here. Moody, awesome, sophisticated, hypnotic, and subtle. Jerry Garcia had no equal. Yeah, so to wrap up the last line Dylan writes here, there's no way to convey the loss. It just digs down really deep. Man, and you could feel that viscerally, man, that Dylan really felt, it was heavy, the loss of Garcia. Man, it was heavy for me too, even though he did look like he was on the way out in '95 when I saw him last in Highgate. So it didn't come as a surprise, but man, did it dig deep. I remember the day after I had to pull over the thruway and just have a good long cry, man. I was listening to a tape from the Philly Spectrum in 1980, and it digs deep. It really digs deep. But on the positive side, Jerry Garcia gave us everything he had. And I mean, that guy his whole life was music. He only lived to be 54, but he only really lived 53 years because he just turned 54. In 53 years, I mean, he gave Deadheads and all his fans more music than they could ever listen to in their lifetime. Here I am, I got into the Grateful Dead around 1981 was when it all started for me. And let me do some math. Yeah, it's 42 years. 42 years later, I'm continually hearing new stuff that I hadn't heard before, and this is going to go on till the day I die. I'll never get bored because Garcia he was, every time he came out, performed, he gave you a new album. And not every single one was spectacular, but there's so much there, so much to go through that he gave more to his fans than anybody. And he gave a lot to Bob Dylan. I mean, Bob Dylan gave more than any. Bob Dylan's, with his songwriting and the way he changed music, gave more to the Grateful Dead and other bands than he'll ever know. But, man, Jerry Garcia was one of a kind. He had no equal. And I'm so happy Bob Dylan came out with this paragraph. And now we're going to continue on with another great year of listening to Jerry Garcia and all the cover bands and offshoot bands out there doing their thing. And that wraps up the second episode of the Deadology podcast. Thanks everybody for listening. I appreciate it. And if you'd like to learn more about Dylan and the Grateful Dead, I have a book out there. It's called Dylan and the Grateful Dead, A Tale of Twisted Fate, available on Amazon. And also, you can find it on my website, tangledupintunes.com. This is Howard Weiner, and I'll be back soon with another episode. Peace out.